The voting for a new Africa Union Commission chairperson has concluded, where Djibouti's Mahmoud Youssef has now been elected. It was a tight contest between Yousef and the former Kenyan Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Algeria's Selma Haddidi has been elected as deputy chairperson. The East African bloc has suffered significant blows this week after Rwanda also failed to get a seat on the Peace and Security Council earlier this week. Newzroom Afrika's Ziyanda Ngcobo is in Addis Ababa. Ziyanda, very good evening to you. Now, Djibouti's foreign minister's appointment to chair the AU Commission happens at a time when the summit is dominated by fears of the Congo war widening into a regional conflict. I believe you're currently with the president of South Africa to get reaction from him before he jets out from Ethiopia.
Well, we're waiting for the president to come down before he heads back to South Africa. It's been a long day with the president arriving in the early hours of this morning, well, leaving South Africa in the early hours of this morning, I should say, to make his way here to Addis Ababa, where he started off in that opening assembly of the 38th AU summit with all the other heads of state. We would have heard from the Ethiopian Prime Minister talking about the importance of this summit, the time within which it is taking place with the geopolitical tensions. We also heard from the outgoing, now former AU Commission chairperson, Musa Faki Mahamat, reflecting a lot on his 8-year tenure as in that position, talking about how, the COVID-19 pandemic was one of the issues that he dealt with, the increase in regional conflicts, such as the one that you've mentioned in the Great Lakes region, but there's also Sudan, there's also Sahel, there's also the northern part of Mozambique, that these conflicts also threaten not only the unity of the African continent, but also the ability to be a rising continent once again. You'll recall, remember in the early 2000s, Katleho, that, Africa was deemed a dark continent, and there was a big push through the African Renaissance to deal with that narrative. And so now, with the geopolitical tensions that are currently taking place, there was a lot of discussion around how to deal with that. There was also conversation around how AI, artificial intelligence, is going to be important for the continent and its progress, and as well as a message of solidarity then from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, reflecting on the relationship between the United Nations and the AU, committing to continue working towards 2 permanent seats of the African continent on the UN Security Council, emphasizing the importance of the African voice being vital and being present on such an important structure. And this, he was saying, against the backdrop, of course, of the theme for this year's AU summit, which was dealing with reparations and justice for, the colonial transatlantic slavery and apartheid, that they're trying to return Africans from the diaspora, to get them to contribute towards building the continent, to get them, to assist with the rise of this continent. So that's some of what we've covered so far. So as we wait then, any moment now for the president to arrive, these are some of the things we'd like to touch on, especially because as well there was a high-level discussion that took place on the sidelines of this AU summit around the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo.
Ziyanda, you mentioned the UN giving a message of solidarity. Have there been other messages or reactions from other member states with regards to the election of Yousef, any endorsements that have been put forward?
One of the interesting guests who was given a platform at the opening assembly is Palestine's Mahmoud Abbas, speaking about how, that part of the world is under reconstruction. Yes, while the ceasefire has held, they are noting with concern the talks of, while they try and reconstruct Palestine, and yes, there's been an exchange of hostages, that there's talk of deporting some Palestinians to other countries, which he says they reject completely, thanking the African continent and the African heads of state for the solidarity that they've shown, either through going to the International Court of Justice, for an example, or even just through their messages of solidarity on multilateral platforms, such as the United Nations, about the injustices that have been taking place in Gaza. So Mahmoud Abbas being given that platform, talking about how the international community needs to unite urgently before radical elements scupper this moment of, the ceasefire and the two-state solution that has been presented on the table.
I mean, Yousef has served as a foreign minister under a number of presidents in Djibouti. Do you feel that his presence now chairing the AU will give a shift in terms of how things will be tackled, especially when it comes to the issues of these conflicts happening on our continent?
Well, it's a bit complex, Katlego, in terms of, being able to even being elected into that position. There's a lot of countries that contribute towards it, and there are countries that organize themselves according to their respective blocs. And I'm just going to turn, because here is His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa going to stop over and say hello to us as we're live on Newzroom Afrika. I'm fine, thanks, and you, Mr. President.
Are you also here in Addis?
Yes, we're in Addis, Mr. President.
What are you doing here?
We want to know, firstly, Mr. President, and now that there's a new AU Commission chairperson and deputy, how does South Africa feel? I'm told Algeria was something that we were gunning for.
Yes, we've got a new leadership in the AU, and we're quite satisfied with the outcomes of the elections. We've got a new AU chair, President Lorenzo, and we've got a new AU Commission chair from Djibouti. We think the capability of both those leaders is just going to lift the continent to higher levels of real hands-on management of the unity process on the continent. And we're also very, very pleased that we got one of our daughters, daughter of South Africa, Mateboge, to become a commissioner for infrastructure. South Africa being the champion for infrastructure, this for us is a real cherry on top, because it's really going to put us at the center of infrastructure development, particularly because we are focusing much more intently on infrastructure ourselves and pouring a lot of financial resources as well as human capital into infrastructure. And so she's just going to energize our processes in South Africa and on the continent. And we're going to be able to learn a great deal of the other initiatives that are underway on the continent. So we come out of the AU meeting really pleased and excited, and the meetings that have also gone on in peace and security, where the report is going to be tabled tomorrow, have also confirmed the positions that we took ourselves to enhance peace in the DRC, a position that was adopted by SADC and the joint summit between SADC and the EAC. So that having been adopted, we now look forward to a real concerted effort to have a ceasefire in the DRC, and to be able to get to a point where we can bring our soldiers back home as we consolidate the peace, as there are confidence-building measures that will now get underway more effectively.
Mr. President, there was a high-level meeting on the sidelines of this AU summit to deal with the issue of the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. But the people who were supposed to be in the room, some of them did not pitch up. And this is also giving a sense that the end is not near, and you've just mentioned now the possibility and hopefully bringing back our troops. How's that going to be possible if a Felix Tshisekedi of the DRC is in Munich as we speak? He didn't attend the summit, he didn't attend the meeting in Tanzania, Mr. President. You need them around the table.
Well, in the end, the decisions of the AU are binding on all of us. And the Peace and Security Commission, having met and taken the decision, and in the presence of the various heads of states as well, and the report is going to be tabled tomorrow, that in itself will be binding on really any country, because if any country does not abide, then it becomes an outlier for negativity. And I do believe that much as President Tshisekedi was in Munich attending another process that has to do with peace and all that, his representatives were here and they participated. So I do believe that the decisions of the AU in that regard will be binding, and we're looking forward to peace being engendered in the DRC. We want peace. We who have been toiling for years, assisting the people of the DRC, are going to be putting pressure on everyone more in a focused way to ensure that there is peace that is installed, so that we also have a chance to bring our boys back home.
And Mr. President, you know, one of the themes for this, the theme actually for this summit has been about, you know, reparation and focusing on racial healing. And we know all too well about that, Mr. President. And so when you look at what's happened with the executive order, for an example, issued by Donald Trump, issuing a Afrikaner status, refugee status to Afrikaners, do you think we're in good stead, you know, towards our own racial healing? What does this mean for our G20 presidency?
Well, the theme for our continent is about reparations and dealing with what happened in the past. And we are going to actively participate in that, because we do believe that the legacies of slavery, the legacies of apartheid, and the legacies of the very bad things that happened in the past do need to be addressed. And our own transformation process speaks to that. Even as we speak about the expropriation of land, we speak about it within the context of transformation, within the context of nation building. And this is precisely what I also spoke about in Parliament when I responded to the debate. And in all this, we are going to be basing everything on our Constitution. And our Constitution is a uniting document. It's a very well-crafted document that is meant to build a nation, that is meant to build cohesion, and that is meant to make every South African feel that they are in this journey together with all of us. So, the executive order that has been given by President Trump is obviously something that is concerning to many South Africans, including those who ran off to the United States to go and talk about some of the challenges that we have, that has now in part, not completely, but in part led to the stance that has been taken by the US. And that stance in itself is based on false information. It's misdirected, and we do want the real facts to be put on the table so that they fully understand precisely what is happening in our beautiful country. And we will be able to have that well clarified. And it's very pleasing to hear even Afrikaners say, we are not leaving, we are here to stay. And it's also pleasing to hear them say they want to go and explain themselves. So that in itself is a very positive indicator for all of us as South Africans, because it's part of the whole process of building a nation. And obviously we want misunderstandings and lack of the true information to be washed away so that we get on with our task of building the South Africa of our dreams. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's President Cyril Ramaphosa. Of course, another positive is that European Council President phone call basically, throwing their weight behind South Africa's G20 presidency. The president, of course, rushing off to the airport to catch his plane, making his way back to South Africa, but of course reflecting and congratulating the new leadership of the top AU Commission structure.